both of these players playing offbeat decks, at least by the metagame that we have here. This is Izzet Tempo in the hands of Julian, and Jean-Emmanuel is on mono blue.
Who would have placed a Haughty Djinn mirror in terms of the best records going into the end of day one?
Crazy.
Right? And this deck by Julian has been extremely impressive, by the way. The addition of the red cards, we've seen it do so much work, but also just kind of a forgotten card there, Lear.
Yeah.
Also doing so much. There's not a lot of people running a lot of graveyard hate, so when Lear resolves, you get a ton of value.
I don't know how people forgot about that card, but they did. Julian didn't. Or who is it? Is it Jean-Emmanuel or Julian that's running it?
Julian has the Lear.
Julian, huh. Very impressed with Julian. Not only the 6-0 record, but the list and the play.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a very, very big stage. And Julian so far does not seem bothered.
I wonder if Julian is just going to run out these Fables. Looks like he is.
A little bit of brute force here. But Jean-Emmanuel is going to be happy to gobble some of these up and get these Spell Pierces out of his hand. It's kind of the dream.
Run through all the counters. Game gets... But Jean-Emmanuel playing the other way to protect your creature and slip out the back instead of shore up here.
Curious to see if Wellman goes for this play again. This is a lot riskier. Wow, he's just going for it. So he's going to get Spell Pierce, and then if there's a land off the top, we could see Haughty Djinn on the battlefield already.
Right. Julian's deck doesn't have a whole lot of cheap ways to kill Haughty Djinn, right? It's the Rending Flame. That's a 3-mana spell.
Yeah, and he has one in his hand, but slip out the back ×2 might have something to say about it. Wow, Impulse. You know, I feel like Jean-Emmanuel wouldn't have been sad about finding a land with Impulse here, but he didn't somehow.
I think that was the hope. Now you can maybe go for another Haughty Djinn. If you draw a land, you go Haughty Djinn with slip out the back backup. If somehow Julian goes land, Rending Flame, Counterspell, you could follow that turn up with the second Haughty Djinn.
Looks like it's going to be considered, though. He doesn't have time to play it this turn because he needs to make sure that he counters. Oh, there's the land anyway.
Well, there you go.
So now do you play Haughty Djinn? It does seem reasonable.
Could also wait for one more turn, right, where you can go Haughty Djinn into double slip out the backup.
Slip out the back.
Slip out the back. Yeah, that.
I think
in my head, it sounded better.
No, it worked for me.
Okay,
I'm digging it.
All right.
4/4 Haughty Djinn on the battlefield. Now everything in Jean-Emmanuel's hand costs 1 mana, although 3/4 of it did before.
Yeah, and Julian really, really wanted a land there. Going for a Fading Hope. Now, John does have a slip out the back, but he has to be mindful of the Rending Flame, right? Why would Julian just lead with Fading Hope here? So just lets it go back to his hand.
It's such a beating, though, that Jean-Emmanuel was like, okay. Right? I mean, you just didn't get a whole lot of that out of Fading Hope there.
Right, and Julian choosing to run out the Fable already has eaten through 2 copies of Spell Pierce. And if you're John, I mean, not looking too bad here. Probably want to find another mana source potentially, right? To go Haughty Djinn and have slip out the backup, along with potentially make this appear. And now he's got the protection spell here too. Excuse me, he's got the Essence Scatter for the Haughty Djinn in Julian's hand.
Yeah, this is working out really nicely for Jean. I mean, if you tell me he gets to just clean counter 2 things with Spell Pierces in game 1, I'm probably thinking like he's good to go, right? It's kind of the dream.
Julian did get to resolve Fable of the Mirror Breaker. We all know how extremely powerful that card can be. Julian has to know that it's going to be fairly unlikely for him to be able to kill that Haughty Djinn. Right, we're looking at Jean-Emmanuel with 4 cards in hand. Any combination of slip out the back plus make this appear or negate will make it so that you can't go Rending Flame into make this appear. And actually discarded a Haughty Djinn there. and drew a shore up. So
okay,
really, really tough spot here for Julian.
Here comes Goblin Shaman.
Jean-Emmanuel thinking, okay, if I block, there are more removal spells that can then kill the Haughty Djinn.
Yes.
Right? You have Strangle,
yes,
Abrade, cards like that. So Jean-Emmanuel thinking, okay, if you do that, should I just take it? That is exactly what Jean-Emmanuel does. Very thoughtful player. Plays around everything that he can.
He really does.
We saw that at the World Championship last year. Things aren't going to change, and guess what? It's been doing him some, it's been doing him well, right? He has just every year he's basically a lock for a top finish for the last 3-4 years.
Yes, I mean a lot of people coming into this tournament had him as the favorite. Like he has earned the respect of the competitive Magic community 100%.
Right.
He used to play kind of weird decks, and then he'd win, and people are like, is this guy getting lucky, or what is going on here? And now people are like, no, he's just good.
To be fair, he still kind of plays weird decks.
He does.
But he just still wins.
Yeah.
Right? Every time I look at a Jean-Emmanuel deck, I go, oh, is this really a good choice in this field? But at this point, I have now learned. I am sorry, Jean, for all the things that I've said in the past, and you're the man.
I'll tell you, he didn't seem super confident in his Explorer deck choice.
Sure.
So let's see.
Yeah.
Essence Scatter on the stack here.
And Julian does have a Make Disappear. And
So
is he going to
Jean-Emmanuel.
Ooh, this is you're using up a lot of resources here to try to make sure that you counter this.
This
but
will seal the deal, though.
it will ensure that that gets countered. But we know that Jean has another Make Disappear here. So now Julian is simply sitting on a Rending Flame that Jean-Emmanuel has 2 answers for. So Julian really, needs to find his own Haughty Djinn maybe. And guess what? Why don't you just find your own Haughty Djinn, right?
There
just
it
right
is.
off the top. There you go.
Did you know that was happening?
No, I didn't. But I'm extremely lucky with these calls, so there you go.
That's part of the reason why we have you here in the booth with me.
One thing to note, by the way, and I only know this because I play the mono blue deck in Explorer, but you can use Slip Out the Back as a temporary removal spell for a turn.
Right.
Right? So if Julian does play his own Haughty Djinn, Jean-Emmanuel could, if he wanted to get aggressive, choose to slip out the back the opposing Haughty Djinn and then try to attack for lethal.
That's right. That can happen. In this case, though, it's going to be an Upkeep Rending Flame. Ooh, Tolarian Terror. Nice. It's going to be a good old 1-mana 5/5. Ward 2 here. That was an Upkeep Rending Flame. That prompted the Slip Out the Back. And the reason for that means that there's no attack here this turn as the Haughty Djinn's phased out.
And now Julian, not in the worst situation here. You do have an active Reflection of Kiki Jiki, so you can, I suppose, copy Haughty Djinn here.
Sure.
Right, and then use that as a blocker, but given that Jean-Emmanuel also find a terror, still not ideal. With Julian with 1 card in hand, it could be tempting, right? Where Jean-Emmanuel goes, I attack.
Yep.
Julian goes, I attempt to make a copy of my Haughty Djinn.
And
then Jean-Emmanuel goes, slip out the back your Haughty Djinn. Now Julian does have the shore up.
That's right.
It's very tempting.
It really is. It really is tempting. We could be done right here, says Jean-Emmanuel.
The question is Jean-Emmanuel okay with just putting another 3/4 into play, right? Not the best blocks. You can chump block or double block. If you double block, you lose the uncopied version of the Haughty Djinn.
So it effectively lets this Haughty Djinn trade for the other one.
Right, and then the Reflection of Kiki Jiki has nothing to do. And he's going for it.
Wow, he's going to go for it, and it is not going to work out well for him.
Right, and now we're looking at a 5/5 Haughty Djinn and a 4/4 Haughty Djinn, I believe, because that's the copy that's going to be made here. So Jean-Emmanuel going for the win. Still has a terror in play. Julian still going for the trade here.
He wants to trade off and then might as well chump block with the 4/4 Haughty Djinn on the Tolarian Terror.
So now we're looking at basically Tolarian Terror versus Reflection of Kiki Jiki on an empty board.
That's right. I mean, the upside for Julian Wellman is very high, but he does need to find something to start copying and quickly, or the Tolarian Terror is going to chew up his life total.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the blue-red deck, however, is there's not a whole lot of great enter-the-battlefield creatures that gives you even copying a Blood-Tithe Harvester gives you something, right?
But anything that he could copy, he could use it to just hold back the terror at least.
Right.
Unfortunately, he doesn't find anything here. Stormcarved Coast. So he's going to get in for 2.
Well, he's not going to block, so he's like, might as well just get in here, take a hit, and hope Jean-Emmanuel whiffs.
Jean-Emmanuel
did not whiff.
Yeah, so this is a 5/5,
not a whiff.
And it is going to present a lethal attack next turn rather than in 2 turns from now.
So perhaps another Haughty Djinn, maybe?
Yes. He needs something very, very quickly here. If this is a land, this game's done, and it's a negate. Boy, we've seen those negates kind of brick off when you need something to affect the board. Now, he does get to survive a turn. Cancel that order.
Or not, and guess what?
Negate doesn't hit it, does it, Paul?
Cannot negate the channel on the Otawara here.
So if Jean-Emmanuel feels like it, he can win this game this turn.
He can.
He's thinking about what Julian could have that would matter.
This is where you kind of open up the old deck list and look through all the different options.
Yeah, it looks like he's content to just get Julian Wellman down to just 2 life on no board whatsoever and just pass the turn back. A little patience here for Jean-Emmanuel.
And I don't think there's anything that Julian can really find here.
No, because he needs 2 somethings, and his deck doesn't really do that.
He's got a lot of 1-ofs, unless he has a 1-of burn down the house.
It is an island. That is certainly not going to do it, and it looks like Jean-Emmanuel gets to win without even having to use Otawara Soaring City. So very nice here from Jean-Emmanuel. Still had all these, and he's got a 1-0 lead to boot over Julian Wellman. He's looking to even things up here, Paul. Jean-Emmanuel sitting on a 5-1 record. Julian is the only undefeated player in our field at 6-0. Jean-Emmanuel, he's a little jealous, you know? He's like, hey, how about we both be 6-1? One more game and he can do that.
Yeah, I was really curious kind of how this pseudo mirror, I want to say, would kind of play out. I mean, we have Fable of the Mirror Breaker, just a fantastic card that Julian has access to that Jean-Emmanuel does not. However, Jean with the, I want to say, more streamlined deck, right? You have probably a few more counterspells instead of removal effects. A lot of several of the removal spells that Julian has in his deck, not really good game 1, right? You're looking at cards like Strangle and Abrade. No real great targets game 1 to kill. Jean-Emmanuel deck looks largely the same here after sideboard, shaving a couple of Fading Hopes. But as you can see, I mean, this is just kind of the game plan for what these mono blue decks do. It's not about just playing out your turn 3 Djinn. It's basically setting up a situation where you go Djinn, and I have 3 mana up, and because of the cost reduction effect of Djinn, all of a sudden you just have 3 hard counters to protect that Djinn.
That's right.
And then it just takes 2 attacks, and then it's over. It almost just kind of plays out as a mono blue combo deck, right?
Yeah.
There's less of a tempo element involved because Jean-Emmanuel cut 4 Delver of Street Secrets, which is a common card, commonly played card in this deck.
Yeah, he said he wanted to go under the sort of escalating fight that the mid-range decks face, where it's like, okay, I've got Rafine and the normal stuff, and then if you want to beat the mirror, you're like, well, I'm going to play this 5-mana creature, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to play a 6-mana creature that's really good. And Jean-Emmanuel said, I don't want to get into that arms race. Right. I just want to try to go underneath, but he didn't want to go quite that low to play Delver.
Yeah.
I think it made the deck a little bit too fragile for his liking.
Also, it just turns a lot of the removal spells that these mid-range decks play live, right? A lot of these players are playing cards like Abrade and Cut Down, right? Just, you know, to make sure they have enough removal spells against each other's 2-drops. And by not playing Delver, all of a sudden your only creatures are Haughty Djinn and Terror, both of which avoid those removal spells.
Okay, underway in game number 2 here. Consider is going to be the first spell played for Jean-Emmanuel, and he says, I got enough lands for now, thank you. Wow, enough terrors for now also.
Julian on the lookout for some lands here. Does not find one. Does have the consider. If he doesn't find a land, we'll probably try and run it out. And then if you see that, does Jean-Emmanuel just spell pierce? Right? It's like, okay, if you're main phasing this, it tells me that you're looking for a land.
It is a strong indicator.
Right? So perhaps you spell pierce, and then you can just run out the thirst next turn, right? Because there's no blue mana from Julian.
Yeah, thirst for discovery main phase would work just fine here.
So very heads up here from Jean-Emmanuel. I mean, Julian, of course, just had to go for the consider.
Right.
You don't want to miss your land drops. That is too devastating.
These spell pierces have been pretty mean from Jean-Emmanuel.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so he's going to go ahead.
Jeez, okay.
And dig through a bit.
Jean-Emmanuel's hand is fantastic. Julian, if he really wants to kind of get back into this, needs to find a land next turn. Get that Fable of the Mirror Breaker in play, which would then allow you to find more lands, right? Get to Chapter 2, filter through some stuff. I wonder if Jean-Emmanuel's considering just discarding 2 more spells
to get terrors?
To get discounted Tellurian Terrors. Because right now, if you discard a land, the terrors cost 4 mana. If you discard 2 spells, they cost 2 mana.
He did. He can cast 2 of them next turn.
Right, okay. Oh, and he's got a spell pierce here to potentially protect.
He's looking to slam the door on this game right now. Julian Wellman unable to find anything to do.
Oh, and look at this. You're going to spell pierce this? Then you get to play an island and play a terror for 1 mana.
Oh, are you serious right now? This is so beautifully set up here by Jean-Emmanuel. This is nasty stuff. And there's the other Tellurian Terror. How about 2-turn clock? Your move, Julian Wellman. And as we know, this deck is not good at coming back. Plus, you can't kill a 5/5 when you only have 2 mana if it has Ward 2. So this is it.
This is it. There will be no more undefeated players after this round.
A great start for Julian Wellman, getting out to the 6-0 lead. But it is going to be 6-1 for both Jean-Emmanuel and Julian Wellman here after this round. And we get the good games, and that's going to do it. Jean-Emmanuel Depraz using that tempo advantage, right? Going back